Now joined by Bronwyn Knight, the CEO of Grit. And were you surprised? 132 million? Was that too much or not enough?
So I think, from our perspective, going to London was quite a process from a regulatory side and obviously going to main board. So we were quite excited actually just about having the diversification of the share register and a number of new institutional investors that came through. Obviously, with our pipeline and our growth, and we have access to 7 markets and soon to be an 8th market in Africa, the ability to raise additional capital and even the higher quantum would have been deployed effectively into the pipeline. But I think as a first African real estate company going into London, we're quite excited about what we achieved.
And there's a lot of talk about foreign investment at the moment in Africa. What was the feeling you were getting from the foreign investors there in London?
Yeah, so I think, we find ourselves in an environment where investors are chasing dividend yield. And we were launching Grit into London at a 9% dollar dividend yield. We do collect 90%, 96% actually of our revenue streams in hard currency. So bringing a 9% sort of dollar dividend yield to a market being UK and Europe, where the returns have been quite flat over the number of years, we saw quite a bit of excitement. The challenge was educating these institutional, more conservative investors around the Africa story itself. So that was, we had been on the road for roadshows for a number of months now, really just getting them over the line around the perceived African risk perspective. But I think at the end of the day, the dollar dividend yield made it very attractive to them, and also the growth prospects of the business.
Now, you've raised a substantial amount of money there. Tell me, how will the property business back here in Africa benefit from what you've actually done there with your listing?
So as I mentioned, the cash that we've raised is actually going to be deployed fully into pipeline, into projects. We're expanding quite a bit of our portfolio into Ghana. We've acquired a US embassy building in Mozambique. We have additional expansion coming into Botswana and Senegal. So the asset value of the portfolio will be going from currently $600 million to close on $1 billion in the next couple of months, taking us to a market cap quite close to 600. So for us, the benefit of growing, the benefit of buying these yield-enhancing assets and enhancing the business and the returns is quite exciting. And then just having an institutional market like London, which really is a very rigorous market from a due diligence perspective. So a lot of those boxes have been ticked for us just going through the LSE process, and a lot of investors find comfort the fact that we have listed on the main board.
Well, we've been talking a lot about foreign investors here on this show today. Just interested, what kind of questions were foreign investors asking you when you were going through this process?
So, actually just putting my mind back to 7 months ago when I started these roadshows, I think one of the big things for foreign investors is they tend to taint Africa with one brush. And I had heard earlier you talking about Zimbabwe, so it's a big education process that in Africa, you still get investment grade Africa. So countries that we invest in, Morocco, Mauritius, Botswana, are investment grade. So it was really around the education process and them understanding that when you see news about Zimbabwe or you see news about DRC or countries that are slightly challenged, it doesn't mean the whole African continent is like that. So that for me was a big question, just really letting them understand and spending some time around our assets and that international corporates have to be in these markets, with obviously all the sectors that are driven out of Africa being, for me, the last frontier, the ability to partner with international corporates whose paper is actually very good. So there has been some interesting questions just around that, interesting questions around the political situation in these countries. Guys have obviously been concerned about moving money in and out of countries. Obviously, they've heard horror stories out of countries like Nigeria. So for us, it was really breaking down what every possible risk would be and then how we as a business had mitigated that for them.
I mean, aside from the currency problem you mentioned there, what other problems do you foresee for the Pan-African property business in the next few years?
So, for us, our model has been very different. And I think our model has been different on the basis of actually, following international corporates. And a lot of instances, they actually sign leases offshore that we actually physically collect in hard currency. So, the ability now for us to build on that pipeline, we really can't sort of compromise at all on the quality of the tenants in that, because as you know, these markets go in turnarounds. I mean, one of the other big aspects of our business is that we multi-geography. So we don't want to be more than 25% exposed to one market, because these markets tend to go up and down. So you'll see we have exposure to Morocco, which is quite unusual for a SADC type business. We have exposure now to Ghana and to East Africa. So for us, it's trying to create that diversification of tenants, diversification of what drives all of our tenants. So not to be heavily reliant on commodities in one market. So for us, it's really now having to deliver in the London market, which is absolutely key. You don't want to get listed on the main board and then you don't deliver on what you promised. There's been so many African businesses that have unfortunately had not such good success rates in London. So for us, it's just developing and continually developing the African story for these new institutions.
Just one last question, Bronwyn. Perhaps it's a bit left field here, but as you know, today is the first day of Women's Month here in South Africa. Are you, as a CEO of a Pan-African property company, are you an exception or are you the rule these days?
So I'm definitively the exception. So when we were actually at the LSE yesterday, they were just saying I'm the first female CEO or executive for an African business that's ever been listed in London, which is actually quite extraordinary in this day and age. If you look in South Africa, there are 50 listed REITs, real estate companies, and there are only three female executives. So for us, I think it's an extraordinary story for Africa. It's an extraordinary story for Mauritius, because we'll be the first Mauritian business listing in London. But I also think it's a remarkable story for women. And I'm really excited to be able to leverage on that going forward.